The topic I want to talk about today, rather not a topic, rather a person, is Andrew Gaze. So I recently just read his book, The Andrew Gaze Story, A Kid, a Ball, a Dream, which was written by Andrew and Grantley Burhard and was published by Hardy Grant Publishing on January 1, 2005. And the reason I chose Andrew is because growing up, the NBA wasn't really accessible to me or to Australians in general. While we knew about it, we knew about guys like Michael Jordan and we knew about guys like Magic Johnson. We never really got to see them. So for me, Andrew was really accessible to me. He was my favourite player, and in my opinion, has made the greatest contribution to Australian basketball. I mean, you can certainly make arguments that he wasn't the greatest Australian basketballer. You can make arguments for Dante Exum. You can make arguments for Luke Longley. You can make arguments for Andrew Bogut. But those guys are playing overseas, and they don't always play for the national team. So I think for me, Andrew certainly was and still is one of my favourite players of all time, and that's why I chose to do this vodcast on him. But really what this video is here to achieve is to talk about the sport delivery systems in place for Andrew and for basketball in general, and how those sports delivery systems actually contributed to his enormous success within the sport. So David Shilbury in his paper discusses sports delivery systems being very complex and encompassing all organisations that allow the athlete to play the sport, but also all the organisations that allow fans of the sport to participate either by watching or getting involved as volunteers. So if we look at the NBL as an example, there are a number of organisations that are involved in delivering this sport. So the NBL, or the National Basketball League, is governed by Basketball Australia, which is required to follow the rules and regulations set out by the International Basketball Federation, better known as FIBA, FIBA. The NBL's annual report in 2012-13 suggested that the teams are funded partially by government funding, but mainly by sponsorship and through private equity or private investment. So, there are generally a number of investment groups that own these teams. For the fan, there are a couple of ways that the sport is delivered to them. So, firstly, through the TV rights. So currently, Channel 10 has the rights to the NBL. The other way that the sport is delivered is at the stadium itself. So generally, these stadiums that the games are played in are owned and operated by a government agency or by the local council. And finally, the referees themselves have their own association, which requires them to referee to a certain standard before they're allowed to preside over an NBL game. It's also important to note the concept of sport for all. So Jurgen Palm suggests that sport for all is two concepts mixed in one. So it's the idea of sport equity, so meaning anyone with any level of any ability can play the sport, and sports development. So for those who do want to continue playing, who do strive to play professionally or play at a high level, there's a clear pathway for them to do so. This is something that basketball in Australia has become very good at. They have a number of different grades and divisions within age groups, starting from as young as 10 all the way up to under 20s. They also have a number of camps that they run for people with disabilities, and they even offer wheelchair basketball at the Olympic level. So they certainly strive to make sure that at any level, with any ability, that they have a competition which you can compete in. So Andrew notes in his book that his early involvement with basketball was mainly through his father, Lindsay. So Lindsay Gaze had competed in basketball for Australia at the 1960 and 1964 Olympics, and took over as the head coach of the Melbourne Tigers basketball team in 1970. But Andrew also states that their house used to back onto the old Albert Park basketball stadium in Melbourne. So he always had access to a basketball court or basketball training facility So he was always around the game. So he said he really didn't have much of a choice when it came to what sport he played, but the fact that he loved the game was really what kept him playing for so long.
So this is just a graphic of what I think Andrew Gaze's top 10 career achievements are. So I'll just run through them really quickly for you. So he was NBL Rookie of the Year. He was a 5-time Olympian, participated in the NCAA National Championship game. He won the Gaze Medal 6 times. He was a 7-time National Basketball League Most Valuable Player. He won 2 National Basketball League championships. He also won a National Basketball Association championship with the San Antonio Spurs. He was inducted in 2005 into the Australian Basketball Hall of Fame. In 2013, he was inducted to the FIBA Hall of Fame. He's only one of 2 Australians to do so, the other being his dad. And he is also the all-time leading point scorer in the NBL at 32 points per game.
The first team that Andrew was involved with was the Melbourne Tigers Juniors. So this team was governed by Basketball Victoria, and their role within that organisation was just to provide infrastructure for that club to compete in tournaments. The next team that Andrew was involved with was the Melbourne Tigers Seniors. So he played for this team until 1983. The next organisation that Andrew was involved in was the men's national basketball team. So this organisation is governed by Basketball Australia, which has to follow the rules, regulations and guidelines set out by the International Basketball Federation, which is better known as FIBA. So the next organisation Andrew was involved in was the Melbourne Tigers National Basketball League team. So this saw the Melbourne Tigers break away from Basketball Victoria and actually become an entity on their own. So it became up to them to generate revenue through sponsorship or through private investment to make sure that they had enough money to pay the players, lease the stadium so that they had somewhere to play, pay the players, pay the coaches, pay the executives, and make sure they had enough money to keep all of that afloat. The next sport organisation that Andrew was involved with was the Seton Hall University basketball team. This team was part of the Big East Conference, which was one of the strongest conferences in college basketball at the time. And the whole competition is governed by the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or the NCAA. The next organisation he was involved with was the Washington Bullets, which are actually now called the Washington Wizards. NBA teams they're all privately owned, so they're all owned by either an individual or a group of individuals, and basically run as a business. And then in 1999, he was a member of the championship-winning San Antonio Spurs. So really, what they allowed Andrew to do was turn playing basketball into a legitimate career. So he was able to all day, every day, just about be around basketball. So play basketball, learning the game of basketball. He basically became a student of the game, and without the National Basketball League in Australia, he would never have been able to do that. Malcolm Gladwell suggests that with anything, it takes 10,000 hours to become elite at something. So I did a little bit of math and worked out that if Andrew spent 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is not that unreasonable to think he did, especially later on in his career. Not later on, but especially from 1984 onwards when he started participating in the NBL, because it was a full-time job. So if he spent 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's 28 hours per week, on his profession. That meant it was going to take 2,500 days for him to become elite at something. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually 357 weeks and almost 7 years to become super elite at a sport or at your job or whatever it is that you're trying to become elite at.
So finally, I thought I'd just give you a quick outline of the teams he played for and the competition formats. So if you have a look at this graphic, any international competition is basically split into pool play, where everyone plays each other in the pool once, and then the top two teams in that pool are then sent to a knockout tournament. The rest of the competitions he played in basically were like a season, so there was a number of regular season games, and then based on the amount of wins that they earned that year, they were sent to a best of 7 series in the NBA, a best of 3 series in the NBL, and in the NCAA, they were sent to a knockout tournament.
I would say it's worth mentioning the influence his dad, Lindsay, had on his basketball career. Certainly, that was the reason he got involved at an early age. And also, I think it was part of the reason he kept playing, until 2005, because his dad was actually the coach of the Melbourne Tigers, and they actually retired together. So I'd say that Andrew Gaze, as a man, as a person, definitely has a good grasp on what sports delivery systems are and how they are able to deliver sports to athletes and to fans. But the book itself, it doesn't really touch on that, because it's more about his life rather than his basketball successes. Even though the basketball successes are sort of the central theme throughout the book. The book sort of highlights that talent identification is not an exact science. So there are people who, might be or definitely are deserving of an AIS scholarship or getting picked in a certain team, but for whatever reason fall under the radar. And Andrew is a good example of that, not receiving an AIS scholarship when he was 16. It also highlights that the systems that the Melbourne Tigers created, obviously with the help of the NBL, allowing them to become a professional organisation, really helped in Andrew's success, because it enabled him to basically spend all his time thinking, playing, doing basketball. And I think without those systems, he might have been a very good basketballer. He might have even been a great basketballer, but I don't think we would see him in the same light as we do currently. Andrew, in my opinion, definitely is the best basketballer that Australia's ever had. Certainly in terms of contributions to Australian sport and things like that. I mean, you can definitely make arguments for guys like Dante Exum, who was the 6th overall pick in the draft last year. Luke Longley, who won all those championships with Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls, and even Andrew Bogut, who was the 1st overall pick in 2006 and is currently playing on the best team in the NBA. But I think in terms of contribution to Australian basketball, Andrew is definitely the best. All right, guys, thanks. That's my vodcast. Hope you enjoyed it. All right.